Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Misinformation Overload, virtual panel discussion, community conversation. When you boil it down and come right down to it, it's about how difficult it is to find actual, unbiased, accurate information in an age where no matter what it is that you believe in, we're constantly being bombarded with misinformation from every side. So I just wanted to, before I turn things over to the panel, I just wanted to just lay a couple of ground rules sort of things. I encourage everyone to comment and question along with our program this evening. You can do that by entering it into your comment section on whether you're following along on Facebook or on YouTube. Just type things in, they'll come across to me, and we'll work them in later in the discussion. We have a couple things that are, that we'll be doing before we get to the actual involvement with the audience. One thing I did want to tell you, though, about your comment, that what you can do and what you can't do in your commentary. And it's really only one thing that you can't do, which is don't include any links. Don't put any URLs in any of the commentary. That's not just for tonight. That's just library policy. We do that on all of our Facebook posts. So don't include a URL or a link because it will immediately just not get shown. Not to sound overly harsh, but that's just the policy. Secondly, when we get to the actual community conversation portion of the evening, it would be great if you could actually enter your comments under your name, a real name. It's so much easier to have a conversation with a person than with an avatar. So it would be great if you identify yourself in your comments and questions as an actual person. And other than that, I would say just remember, civility is always a plus. When having a conversation, it's two parts, listening and talking. So to be actively involved, let's just keep that in mind. And you know what? At this point, I am going to take myself out of the picture, even though I'm going to keep my microphone on. And I would like for our panelists to introduce themselves. So if you don't mind, even though Julia is big right now, Gabriel, would you care to introduce yourself? Here are our 5 panelists. We have a great panel for this evening, and I'm going to let them talk now.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Gabriel Draxler. I am a librarian from Janesville, Wisconsin. I've been a librarian for over 5 years, and I got my MLIS from UW-Madison.
All right. Thank you. And now, Julia, it honestly is your time in the spotlight now.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Julia Lee, and I'm the Youth Services Manager at Manitowoc Public Library. I've been in libraries for 7 years, and I'm a Master's of Library and Information Sciences from UW-Milwaukee.
Thank you, Julia. Luann, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, everyone. My name is Luann Lonergan, and I'm a retired nursing instructor. I've been a registered nurse in the state of Wisconsin for 39 years.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan Marchant. I've lived in Manitowoc for 11 years. I'm married with 2 kids right now. I am a trustee on the MCLS Library Board and the Manitowoc Public Library Board. But tonight I have my PFLAG hat on. I am the current president of PFLAG Manitowoc County. We are an LGBTQIA plus support group. And that is all I have to say.
Fair enough. And last but not least, Natasha, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Natasha Khan. I've lived in Manitowoc County most of my life. So I'm just here as a community voice. I am a member of Lakeshores United Visionaries, so I'm just going to bring that perspective.
All right, awesome. And right now we are going to move into a brief PowerPoint, which will give us all, a common jumping off point from which to proceed. So give me a second while I bring that up. And we will be off and running with that in just a second. And here we go. So whoever wants to jump in first, just jump in first.
Could we go to the next slide, Tim?
Yes, definitely. You mean this? You want something besides the exact title? All right.
So as we get started here, I would just like to take a minute and set up some guidelines and expectations. Tim touched on this a little bit, but each of us in attendance here brings to the table specific lived experiences, cultural perspectives, and point of view. So when we speak, we'll speak from our own experiences and try not to judge or moralize the thoughts or experiences of others. We all carry biases, and we ask that we all keep those in mind during this conversation to keep our conversation mindful and productive. We can use I statements such as I feel or in my experience, avoiding statements that generalize or globalize experiences such as you should. And we encourage you to ask questions that engage with the material in a respectful manner. The best learning happens by asking questions that come from a place of respect and by listening to others. So be open to considering new information and incorporating new ideas. This first slide deals with those kind of topics, challenging respectfully. So when we talk about misinformation here, we'll talk a lot about challenging material, and we want to do that in a respectful way. And because when we don't challenge material, it really creates a lot of divisiveness, and people end up discussing implications of something that's just not true. So it's okay to challenge others, but if we could do it with civility, that would be excellent.
I think we're ready for the next slide then, Tim.
Yep.
Okay, so I will start this out. So as Megan said, everyone has or has had bias at some point, even if they don't realize it. It's important to recognize it and to try to do better. So what is bias? Bias is a tendency to believe that some people, ideas, etc., are better than others, which can result in treating people unfairly. So there are three different kinds: explicit, implicit, and confirmation. Explicit bias refers to attitudes and beliefs that can be positive or negative that we consciously or deliberately hold and express about a person or group. Explicit and implicit biases can sometimes contradict each other. For implicit bias, this includes attitudes and beliefs, again, positive or negative, about other people, ideas, issues, or institutions that occur outside of our conscious awareness and control, which affect our opinions and behavior. Everyone has implicit biases, even people who try to remain objective, that they have developed over a lifetime. However, people can work to combat and change these biases. And lastly, we have confirmation bias, or the selective collection of evidence. This is our subconscious tendency to seek and interpret information and other evidence in ways that affirm our existing beliefs, ideas, expectations, and our hypotheses. Therefore, confirmation bias is both affected by and feeds our implicit biases. It can be most entrenched around beliefs and ideas that we are strongly attached to, or that can provoke a strong emotional response. I think we go to the next slide.
And I think, I'm glad we brought up bias, because it has a lot to do with information, unfortunately, and the misinformation that we see online. And this is kind of where Gabby and I come in. This is kind of where the libraries come in. Oh, you can scooch to the next slide, Tim, because not only do humans have bias, but your sources of information also have bias. And when we say we have MLIS degrees, that is a Master of Library and Information Science degree. So we have training. We are the experts on research, verifying sources. So if you have questions on sources, if you need to find good, credible material and information, you've got your friendly neighborhood librarians here to help you kind of sift through all that information, because there's a lot out there. And I think that's why we're having this conversation today, because there is so much information, the information overload, that it's so much easier just to keep sharing the misinformation than it is to actively search and try to find out if it's true or not. It's so, as humans, we we like to go with the easiest course, right? So if we're just, you see something, you share it, who's going to go and check to see if it's true first? Well, we're challenging you guys to see, to actively vet the information that is coming across, because the only people who can stop information is us. So when we talk about biases, we're also going to talk about bias in the source of information. So I think we're going to go to some animation, Tim, and Gabby, feel free to jump in at any point.
I will.
So there are three different types of sources of information. Unbiased is a type of source that reports the news and facts objectively. It's not going to put a spin on anything. It's just going to tell you this is what happened and this is who said it. It's very cut and dry. It's the facts, right? But that's not sensational. So the next level is slanted. It's going to tell you things you already know. It's still going to report information, but it's going to give a slant. So you oftentimes hear people say, oh, well, that paints conservatives in a negative light, or that paints liberals in a negative light. And different news sources can have that kind of slant. It's going to give the information, but it's going to make one side of a conversation look slightly better or slightly worse than another. So it appeals to certain bases because it tells you what you already know. If you already think negatively of one side or the other, it's going to reinforce those beliefs. And then there's the third level, which is bias. And it tells you what you want to hear. This is, I think, the most dangerous kind, because it's not going to give you real information. It's going to just tell you what you think you want to hear instead of actually giving you the true facts. So it's a very slippery slope of source information, and how do you tell the difference, right? So that's where we're starting today, and that those are the questions we're going to ask. Gabby, did you want to jump in and I'll start? I talk a lot.
Nope, you did great, Julia. And I think we're doing the next one also. So okay. We're ready for you, Tim.
Okay. So when we talk about misinformation, what do we mean by that? Gabby, do you want to jump in for this one? Or you want me to keep going?
Keep going. You're doing great.
Okay. So what do we mean by misinformation? There's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. And then also we added fake news here as well. So misinformation is, I like to think of it as like accidental sharing of false information. So it's spread. It's like when you see something on Facebook and, for example, my brother-in-law gave me this example. Love you. I'm using it as an example. He shared his Facebook page and somebody caught a shark in Lake Michigan and it was awesome and he couldn't believe it happened. And I was like, there is no shark in Lake Michigan. No one caught a shark in Lake Michigan, but he thought, he just shared it. He thought it was cool, but didn't stop to look to see if it was a true story or not. So that's just one example. You see something, you think, oh, that's cool, or it makes you upset and you share it without actually seeing if it's true. And misinformation is, you don't mean to mislead people. Whether the person who created the shark article meant to mislead someone or not, there's a different question. But generally, it's not malintent. It just accidentally, or you can give people the benefit of the doubt. You don't know if they meant to mislead someone or not. The next level then is disinformation. This is deliberate. People create this to mislead someone because they are trying to manipulate a narrative or share false propaganda. So that definitely has some malicious intent there. And then fake news, which we all hear thrown around all the time, is purposely created and sensational, emotionally charged. And we'll give some examples of what that means. But it's going to have all the exclamation points. It's going to have really emotional words in there. And the idea is to make you react so emotionally that you no longer think logically. And it affects whether you really even consider the facts or not. You're so upset at that point that it doesn't really matter if the story is true or not. So those are kind of the three levels of misinformation that we'll be talking about today. All right, so we've got some examples.
So Tim, you can go to the next slide. I'll take this one. So right now, this rumor is circulating in our communities right now. And so I first heard this fake news in February, and unfortunately, I heard it again this week. And it's an absurd rumor but people in the community continue to believe it and continue to spread it. The false allegation goes something like this. Did you hear that our schools are providing litter boxes in the schools for students to use? Yes, it's true. Students who identify as cats are being allowed to use litter boxes that are placed in the bathrooms. Can you believe it? Of course, school districts in several states, including Wisconsin, have debunked these claims. It is absolutely untrue. It is ludicrous, but community members are convinced this is happening in our schools. So why does this falsehood continue to circulate? I did a little digging and I found in December, a parent in Michigan claimed that she had been told by students that there was a litter box in the bathroom for students who identified as cats. This particular school board meeting was videotaped, and the video feed of the parent speaking went viral. It was tweeted and shared on Facebook thousands of times. Many who watched the video or saw the post on Facebook took those claims seriously, even though the superintendent of the school addressed the allegations as completely false. The rumor continued to spiral out of control when a Nebraska state senator verbalized his outrage that litter boxes were being used in schools. He did this during a televised debate. Hours later, he apologized, saying he misspoke, but his untrue comments were viewed over 600 times on Twitter by the next morning. So, because of this rumor, school districts in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, and Nebraska have had to deal with the fallout of these false allegations, taking precious time away from real student issues to deal with these intentional lies. Looking further, the litter box rumor is really a thinly veiled attempt to mock transgender youth restroom equality. So that is the intent of this lie. It spreads the notion if schools allow transgender youth to use the bathroom they're most comfortable in, then they will be forced to accommodate every other so-called identity, even if it means litter boxes for children who identify as cats. These antics are harmful to transgender youth who are already at high risk for adverse mental health outcomes and suicidal ideation. Transgender youth need our acceptance and understanding, not further exclusion and alienation. So this litter box disinformation campaign, which is continuing to circulate in our communities today, makes me angry and sad. It has far-reaching detrimental consequences for children, and it needs to stop now. All right, thanks. You can go to the next slide, Tim.
Well, did anyone else want to add anything in on that before I go to the next slide?
I'd love to. What about you guys? I talk a lot though, so someone else can talk for a little bit.
Go, Julia.
Well, I just think this is a great example of how misinformation can spread so quickly and so far-reaching. Because, Luann, thanks for doing that research. But it started in Michigan, and it really spread to different communities. I remember talking to my sister who lives in Waukesha. I had just visited her, and she was like, "Well, you heard about this, that the schools are putting litter boxes in the bathroom." And I was like, what? And I hadn't heard of it until she told me. And I was just like, I can't, that can't be right. It's, first of all, it's not hygienic. Like, just my brain just started thinking about all the things that just didn't seem right about it. So I did a little bit of research as well. And it was just really, I had no idea at the time when she mentioned it to me. It was so far reaching. And I think that just shows the power. And the picture, the example we have here was actually a fake email that someone created. So that's definitely an example of that disinformation. It had that malicious intent. They made it look like it was a school email, and it isn't. It's a fake email. So it just shows the power of how, if you get really emotionally charged and you share something, then you have no idea how far it's going to spread, and the implications for real kids and real people working in those schools who had the folks getting really upset at the meeting. So I think it just shows it's a very powerful means to disrupt conversations and really add to divisiveness in our communities. So I was shocked when I heard about it. It's all the way in Waukesha. It's all it's in Michigan. It's everywhere.
Mhm.
We did have a comment come in that on this that I'd like to share, if you don't mind. Darian Kotarabic wrote in, yes, our county health department has confirmed numerous times that litter boxes in schools would never be approved or allowed, as it would not be up to code, which, you know, is one of the things you mentioned, Julia, and Luann as well.
Yeah. So it's oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this also, like this example also speaks to just how dangerous social media can be when it comes to disinformation or misinformation. You know, it's just, it can spread so fast, and it's just insane to think about it. Because like for me personally, when I heard about this, I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Who would believe that? But then you listen to what Luann was saying, and a lot of people believed it. And especially when you have people in power like senators giving truth to it, or what they think is truth, and that makes it more powerful and more scary for things like that are even more dangerous than this.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really hits the nail on the head, because you have people in power who have the power to vote on laws, and if they are not having correct information, right? If they are being persuaded by misinformation, I think that's a very real and dangerous issue. So I think that in and of itself is worthy of talking about, like, hey, this is something that happens quickly and it has a lot of far-reaching power that we don't think about when we're on Facebook or Twitter and just hit the share button, and I'm just sharing it on my social media profile. It can't hurt anybody, but there's a lot of damage it can do. And I think just stopping and taking that second to really analyze what kind of information we're consuming is so important.
And again, I would think that our elected officials might, before they run to a microphone and kind of shout out these rants before they even check, and hours later recanting it, maybe they should check before they go on national TV to report such things. That would be helpful.
Is it all right if I share with you another comment from someone who isn't necessarily as accepting of what you're saying? Is it okay with you if I share that on it? Because it is about what we're talking about. Annie wrote in, I think the bigger issue is the entire assumption by our school boards that indoctrination of humans identifying as another gender, race, or what have you. I mean, you just spoke as if you are the final authority on the issue. I don't think anyone was talking about being an authority. I think they were talking about actual facts that have been disproved. It's not an authority issue at all. I mean, would you agree with me? I'm just moving the conversation in this direction, but I'd love to hear what the five of you have to say on that.
Well, I think so. It's a really good example, though, right, of what this type of misinformation does is it makes you forget or be willing to look past the facts, right? You are enraged or you're confused or you're excited, depending on what the misinformation is spreading. And the follow-up comment, it says, because it's not up to code is the question. Well, of course, that's how we rationalize it, right? We have the facts that random adult community members cannot get into schools and find those things out. That's for safety reasons. The logical, factual reason that this is a rumor is because it is not up to code, much less of anything else, right? And drawing the belittling comparison of kids being cats is a way to spread that harmful message about transgender youth or people who don't conform to certain societal norms, right? It makes us forget the facts of some of those things. And that's the harm that we're kind of trying to enlighten everyone who's here with us today, that misinformation is a big deal, right? It's not just something to scroll past or click through or recant a statement. It has consequences, which we're going to see when we keep going. Mm-hmm. Not rushing anybody to keep going. Conversation.
Well, and Darian commented again, just specifically, yes, of course. I know our health department has been contacted about it numerous times. So she was just sharing information. That sharing of truthful information is not claiming to be an authority on the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that, though. I mean, there we have a good example of an honest conversation, and the person who brought it up, Annie, just posted, and I'm going to share this as well because it's worth showing. Got it, Darian. Thank you. I mean, that's why. Thank you for everyone actually who has joined us is actually listening to what everyone said about conducting this conversation. So thank you to everyone. Shall I move on to the next slide?
Yes.
Is that a yes? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. And next slide.
All right. So this one, you may see it's a local example that we wanted to use because, and I say local, but it also is a national issue as well. And you will see this if you look on news from around the country, there has been a push to censor materials that are pornographic or harmful to children. So this is an example locally that there have been people who have been spreading the misinformation that the public library has pornography and that children have access to it. And as a librarian, I can assure you that there is no pornography in the library, and there never would be. We follow state statutes, federal laws. We would not get funding if there was pornography in the library. And we also have professional guidelines and standards, including the American Library Association. So there is, I can tell you equivocally, there is no pornography in the library, and that is just misinformation. And I wanna really talk about why the word, when you hear about this, why the word specifically pornography is used, and specifically used in relationship with kids, because I think there's definitely word choice here when there's misinformation. We talked about those emotionally charged words, and pornography is definitely one of those more emotionally charged words. You hear that, especially pornography for children. Oh my gosh, what could be worse? You immediately start getting upset, and the rest of the facts, like, would a library have pornography? Would we have it? Would the library have pornography with kids who have access to it? Those are other questions that your brain just kind of drops out because you see that word pornography and oh my goodness, you get really emotionally charged.
And Julia, can I jump in?
Jump away.
So, right, we're talking about emotionally charged language because all of that is very intentional. Because scientifically, when our brains are processing emotions, those fire faster and stronger, right? It is, are you more worried about the speeding car or the falling cup, right? If you had to choose one, you're going to choose the bigger threat. So your brain is processing that really scary information only. You don't have time to do those secondary, more logical thoughts like Julia was saying. Would a library really do that? Right? And this is the point of what sometimes, right, depending on the author or the side or the point or the target, that's what this misinformation is intended to do. It is intended to overwhelm your brain so that you follow the group, you follow the people who are doing the right thing, and you forget about everything else, not knowing necessarily why was this piece of information created, who created it, and what was their agenda or what was their intent with this information, and what should I really be doing about it? How should I be processing this information?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And so when we're thinking about it, and Gabby, I'm glad you brought that. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, what is the agenda, or what is the intent of the people behind it? And a lot of it is censorship. There are books that people don't agree with. If you don't agree with books in the library, that's perfectly fine.
Don't read them.
Don't read them. And are there books that Megan might not want their children reading? Absolutely. But that's up to Megan or up to the parent. And librarians always say, like, yes, parents, please take an active role in choosing materials for your children. To make sure they're the materials that you want them reading. And every family is going to be a little bit different, right? So the library just provides a wide variety of resources for everyone, and for adults, teens, kids. And of course, there's going to be books that you might not want your child reading for whatever reason. And that's totally up to the parent to do. And we fully support parent rights to choose what's right and what's not for their child. But the fact of the matter is that there is no, I assure you, there is no pornography in the library. And your friendly neighborhood librarians are always happy to help you choose the resources, choose the materials that are going to be right for your family. So again, as Gabby said, if you see these emotionally charged things, it has a design behind it. So think about, okay, what is the intent? Who created it? And what is it really trying to do before jumping in and clicking that share button? And I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in with thoughts.
Yeah, I do. So I was just going to say, well, this is another example that, like, personally, I look at this and I'm like, well, that's crazy. That's not happening. That's not a thing, and I think it boils down to what both Julia and Gabby were saying, is that it's trigger words that are, you hear pornography or like the litter box stuff, and you immediately, like, you're like, what? And then you can't think about, is this even real? Is this factual? And then all of a sudden you're just sharing this information before really realizing that it's not even true. And I think another point I wanted to make is that, the library is an amazing source, and they're going to have things for everyone. And, it's your job as the parent to, if there's something you don't want your kid to read, then that's your job. It's not the library's job to take that off the shelves for anyone. So,
well, and this is, so I have a very specific information background before I was a librarian. And words like, right, like we just said, pornography, we see a lot of communism accusations thrown in there too, right? These types of words are fear-mongering and propaganda. Like, that's how strong the context and the mission of some of these words is tied to. And so Julia was saying, right, there are books in the library for everyone. And if it's not for you, that book might be really important to someone else, right? Whether it is sexual health, religion, culture, right? All of these things mean something to someone, and that is why a library has them. And it comes back to, there's a specific comment about a specific book. And yes, any age can check that out, but it is always the parent's responsibility to preface, to allow, right, what is right for you and your child. You don't get to choose what's right for someone else's child or someone else at all. That's called censorship. But the library is not the parent. The library is a resource. The library is not pushing an agenda. The library is for everyone. And if one person needs that book, we're going to have it, or do our best to have it. And if that one book is not for you, just keep on browsing. There's lots of other ones that are for you.
Absolutely. And if you have concerns, about, let's say you're a parent, you have concerns about what your child may find or what your child may be accessing, we always encourage parents to take an active role. Come with your child to the library. And some parents are like, well, I'm just going to use my library card and allow my child to check out only when I'm present. And that's totally up to that parent. I mean, if you're concerned about, making sure your child reads things that are appropriate for them, awesome. And we absolutely support that right of the parents to take that active role, so we can provide those resources, like Gabby said, to everyone. And we don't promote one resource over the other. We are just we are there to provide the resources. And as Gabby said, we are not the parent. Actually, legally, we cannot act in loco parentis in lieu of a parent. We can't. Library staff cannot do that.
Not even a little.
and we shouldn't, right? We shouldn't. We should not be telling someone what they can and cannot read. As a librarian, we never tell people, you should read that, you shouldn't read that. We simply try to pair up resources as people request them and as they're looking for them. That's our job, to pair people with resources. So we 100% support parents' rights to help their child choose and filter content as is right for their family. 100% absolutely. And that is the parent's right and only the parent's right.
So Julia, you brought up a good point about age restrictions, which actually addresses a comment. Sorry, Tim, I'm doing your job just a little.
No, that's fine.
I'm looking at a particular one that says the library could have age-related restrictions in place, like a movie rating. You need the card to access the preview content. And actually, I tell this, so I work mostly with teenagers. And I tell this to my students who come in looking for the library. The only thing you need to know in a library is who your librarian is. And this includes parents. If you're worried about what you do and don't want your kid to check out, granted, we cannot be the parent, but we can help you put up some of those restrictions. If you don't want your kid to check out teen or adult materials because they're only 8, we can put those types of blocks on their card with your permission. We can help you write no PG-13 movies. We can put those blocks on your child's card with your permission. But again, it comes from you, the parent. We're just using the tools and resources to help you. So if you are really worried about what your child is bringing home, come and talk to your librarian. We can help steer in directions, right? We're not going to tell or direct, but we can give you, this is a great area for you to browse, or maybe this would be better, right? We are here to help you, but we cannot be you, the parent.
And I'm jumping into Tim. I saw a question come in. Is there a way for a parent to prevent their child from encountering some of the more mature search results? And the answer is yes. So especially on the Libby Overdrive app, which is where I believe these examples were taken from, there are parental controls that you can set the age restrictions to only display kids' books, only display teens. So there are settings you can go in and change, so you can only see certain age levels. Absolutely.
And Gabby, since you and Julia are making me obsolete,
sorry,
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Ann Schutte, who asked that question, just wanted to say thank you for addressing it. And there's also another comment that Nancy Slattery made, is that individuals with library cards are powerful. Parents have the control of their children. The library staff is not a parent. They must follow the law, as it is not how someone wants it to be. And that just echoes what you were saying, but I'm backing you up on the point that the parents are the ones with the power.
Sorry, I was muted. This is also a really, I didn't know it until I decided to become a librarian. Libraries are governed by the American Library Association, the ALA. So there is an entire governing body for how libraries have to be run. It does not matter how big or small or how Wisconsin or Western or East Coasty, right? It doesn't matter where your library is in America. You follow these rules, these guidelines, and they are rules. There is the Bill of Rights, the ALA Bill of Rights. There's the ALA Code of Conduct, Code of Ethics, all of these things of what librarians do and don't do, and when it is our job to step in. So it is our job to step in when there are challenges of censorship attempted to be made against public materials, no matter what the reason is. It is a librarian's job to defend the right to read, and that literally is what libraries represent. We represent your right to read, to information, however you want to get it. And again, we're an institution, right? You have to kind of remember that. We might be really awesome people, but we also represent an institution. And that institution has limitations, boundaries, and rules. We're not going off the charts here in any shape or way. We are governed very thoroughly.
And Darian had another comment that her library card does say parent guardian is responsible for materials checked out to a minor. And there's also been some comments made about it being a website and not needing the library card to get on there. But Emily Brent just said there's also the option to opt out of the virtual library card if parents are concerned about what a child may look at while at school. Or while they're not around.
Oops, sorry, Tim.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Everything in a library is by choice. However, it is the only place where you are not forced to make a choice. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to be a certain way when you come in, except dressed, but that's about it. Every single thing in a library is by choice. And we set that up for you to choose what you do and don't want to do, right? Like we just had the example of the virtual library card. When virtual access was really the only way you could have that during COVID, we made that choice available to you. If you don't want that choice, don't take it. If you don't want that book, don't take it, right? Look at all of this picking and choosing you get to do, and no one is forcing you to either choose it or not. It is so up to you. It is, my libraries are my favorite thing because they, right? We like to talk about the American freedom. Libraries are the pinnacle of what American freedom looks like, right? The choice to choose, and it is totally free.
And I think, kind of echoing off of Gabby, before I got into libraries, I didn't realize how much we as librarians and libraries as an institution protect your rights. We protect your right to intellectual freedom for all people, and we protect First Amendment rights. We are all about free speech, free thought, freedom to read, and we will protect those intellectual rights for everybody, and that is really the core of our institution. So we are protecting your rights to be able to access materials, regardless of content, regardless of what if it's controversial or not. So we are here to protect your rights, and I don't think there's anything more American than the public library. So
exactly.
Annie wanted to thank you for bringing up the restrictions and blocks that are available to parents if they so choose to have it. You know, I think it's interesting that a lot of this has to do about what's available on the internet. And having gone to school in the Stone Ages before, you know, Al Gore had created the internet,
misinformation.
Everyone still knew the juicy parts in certain books to look at. If you want, it's always been available. But Darian also brought up another really interesting point here, and it's, I hear you, but if a child has access to the internet, they have access to much more than a preview of the book that is being talked about. Filters and restrictions then are necessary on the parent's part on the internet. Gabby made it sound like that is an option here when searching for books using filters or contacting them for restrictions, if she understood correctly. Is that accurate, Gabby?
I'm reading to make sure I understand. Less on your home computer, right? We can't help you necessarily do that remotely. We can educate you on how to apply filters if that's something that you'd be interested in for your home computer. But no, I think that mostly comes back to parental supervision. The same thing, right? When your child is on the internet, you are still the parent.
I think, and again, I kind of want to come full circle and say, like, all of these things we just talked about, all the logical facts that we brought up, there is no pornography in the library. You know, if you're interested in blocks in your child's card, you can approach the librarians. There are restrictions you can set on Libby Overdrive. All these things you don't think about when you have such an emotionally charged wording. It just stops the logic. It stops those questions. So when you see this emotionally charged wording, really think and take a step back. Why are these words being used? And what really is the answer? And the best people to ask about this are your librarians.
And just look at how far that took us, Julia, right? One example led to all the ways we want to protect our children and how can we in all of these different facets. And well, stay tuned for the rest of our slideshow because we're going to tell you.
Now, you know, and even though I do want to move forward, there is a book by Lisa Sweet that keeps coming up in the commentary. I'm sure you probably know what I'm referring to. That is being referred to as pornography in the library. Does anyone on the panel want to address that?
Tim, can we have the definition of pornography, please?
You certainly can. Pornography, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional or emotional feelings. That is the dictionary definition of pornography.
All right. I'm a nerd, so I looked it up. 365 sizzling sex positions. I hope that's okay to say on the air. But that's the book that was referenced. Some of that is educational. Some people need that information, and that is okay.
And it's in the adult section.
It is in.
It is not. Yes,
correct.
Just to be clear, that's in the adult section. It's up to the parent to filter that material.
Right, and it would. We really like this Lisa Sweet author here in the comments, but those materials, the same thing. There was a reference to Playboy. Guess what? There are very specific academic libraries that archive Playboys. You will not find them, though, in your public library because those have different intents. This is an intent for the public. And guess what? Some of the public has needs. Like, we're going to address those two in an age and audience appropriate way. Again, don't.
And as you said, educational. It is educational, and as Megan said, it is in the adult section. Yes. And also a problem seems to be it's online. Again, as everyone up and down the panel has been saying, that is the parent's job, and it is not either legal or the right thing for the library to be the parent.
No.
Correct? I mean, I don't think that's a misinterpretation. I don't think I'm spreading misinformation by saying that. Now, as much as I really do love this topic, time is going by really fast. So I think we must move on to the next slide, if that's okay with everybody.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
All right, I'm going to look at some health disinformation since we're still in a deadly pandemic, and health misinformation and disinformation is not new. However, it's skyrocketed during the pandemic. There's a Center for Countering Digital Hate, and this is a nonprofit, non-governmental agency, and it published 2 reports highlighting some disturbing findings. Both of those reports are in the reference section from this PowerPoint, so you can have access to everything that I'm talking about. First, just 12 people were behind 70% of the vaccine disinformation content on Facebook. The report named them the Disinformation Dozen. None of the 12 has relevant medical expertise, but they all profited immensely from COVID misinformation products and businesses. So I'm going to just highlight 2 of the Disinformation Dozen. The most well-known is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is the nephew of former President John F. Kennedy. And he has made millions from his from misinformation about the vaccine. He's making millions from a book disparaging Anthony Fauci. So just that we're looking at that the pandemic was highly profitable for a few people. The second person is Joseph Mercola. He's the super spreader of COVID-19 misinformation. This man is an alternative medicine physician who makes his money selling supplements and wellness products. His net worth is $100 million. He published over 600 vaccine falsehoods in Facebook during the pandemic in several languages. So he's very good at what he does. And he sold nutritional supplements as remedies for COVID-19 online. So the Disinformation Dozen have a following of 59 million people on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And despite repeatedly violating all of the terms of agreement, 9 of them still remain on all 3 platforms. So that's really problematic. In the Pandemic Profiteers Report, the anti-vax misinformation industry had an annual revenue of $36 million. So I wonder why they weren't readily removed from those platforms. The big tech stood to gain about 1.1 billion. So it's highly profitable, this misinformation. So if there's no questions, we can go to the next slide, which is even more disturbing about COVID.
I did have one thing I was going to hop in if that's okay, Luann.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think something very interesting about this example is that, you had mentioned that they are basically, well, I think you said Robert Kennedy wrote a book, I think you said, about Fauci. Well, what is fascinating and scary to me is that, Dr. Fauci is an expert in his field. And throughout the whole pandemic, everyone has been coming after him saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's just like, that's crazy to me because he went to school for however long and he is an expert in this field. Like with librarians, they're an expert in their field. And we need to remember that we have to these experts.
And I think, Natasha, you're highlighting another danger of misinformation. You start mistrusting experts. It's kind of like going to your doctor and saying, well, that's not what WebMD said, or like, here's what Google said, instead of trusting the person with the PhD and the degree. And I've been trying to share information with some of my relatives from Mayo Clinic, from Johns Hopkins University, and they don't trust it. And I'm just like, if you don't trust the Mayo Clinic, you don't trust Johns Hopkins University, who are you trusting with your medical information? It's just it's distressing.
Mm-hmm.
There was a comment that just came in from Annie. While it may be true that those individuals profited, you have not pointed out how greatly pharma profited. Perhaps you're being a bit biased in which facts you are choosing to highlight. Luann, how would you address that?
Well, thank you, Annie. We're really talking about the misinformation. And so that's really where I got my resource, was from that, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. So they really specifically looked at disinformation on Facebook. So that's what the thrust of this conversation was, talking about the misinformation. So again, I really won't be able to comment to that at this point, but that certainly could be a topic for another conversation. What we know is many people who spread misinformation gained lots of money from that. They sold things that were not proven. All of them did not have medical expertise in the field, and they were the ones, 12 of them were really pointed out as being the disinformation dozen. So we're specifically looking at misinformation here.
And I think, oh, go ahead, Yay.
Okay. I will say, Annie, that you're on the right track of seeing how far misinformation trickles down in terms of consequences, right? It has consequences if the information was right and if it was wrong, because sometimes it takes a while for the facts and the truth to come out. So it is always really important to look, yes, like Luann was mentioning, where did it come from? So that top, but what effects is it having? So that come down that bottom. Go ahead, Julia.
And I was just going to say, I think Luann's main point is, what is the intent behind the misinformation, and who is creating it, again, and what is the agenda? And the agenda for these individuals she's talking about was to make money off of the disinformation, the misinformation that they were spreading. So there's always that intent. What is the intent behind this information? Why are people spreading this disinformation? And in this case, it's the profit. Yeah. Okay.
Next slide.
Yes. Perhaps more disturbing is the vaccine misinformation led to 319,000 preventable deaths. So we now know we just passed 1 million COVID-19 deaths in this country, a once unfathomable scale of loss, even for the country with the world's highest recorded toll from the virus. The tragedy is that 319,000 didn't have to die. A Brown University just came out, May 13, 2022, a study from Brown University. They looked at the time period from January 1st, 2021 to April 30th, 2022, and they calculated peak vaccination rates and imagined that rate continued until all adults in the state were fully vaccinated. They were then able to calculate the percentage of deaths that could have been avoided in each state. So with this calculation, 5,444 more people in Wisconsin would have survived COVID had they been vaccinated. So these are sobering statistics. Back in July 2021, the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he said, by and large, people who are unvaccinated were dying from COVID. So he issued an advisory calling misinformation on COVID an urgent public health threat. So that was issued in July of 2021. Then in November of 2021, the Surgeon General put together a toolkit for addressing health misinformation because so many Americans were dying. And so what this toolkit is, the toolkit is available to you in the reference section of this PowerPoint. It is similar to what we're doing here, but it's really focusing on health misinformation. It targets healthcare professionals, teachers, librarians, faith leaders, and trusted community members. It's got presentations, slides, best practices, scenarios. It's free to use in your community. Also, just in March through May, so it just closed, a request for information was issued by the Surgeon General for input from tech companies, healthcare providers, and community organizations about COVID-19 misinformation. Stories and information will be used to prepare and respond to future public health crises. We don't want the misinformation what happened during this pandemic to happen again. And it is the first time tech companies have been asked to divulge certain data publicly, including major sources of misinformation, its extent, and who may have been targeted. As a nurse, looking back, the vaccine rollout was both a remarkable success and a colossal failure. Both of those are true. The United States was first in getting those vaccines developed and manufacturing them so quickly. Disinformation and the inability to stop disinformation during a deadly pandemic killed hundreds of thousands in this country. It is utterly unconscionable. And that is really disinformation, what occurs during a deadly pandemic.
I'm going to breeze through some comments that have been made so that you can address this, Luann, if that's all right, and everyone else on the panel as well. But these all kind of run together. There are thousands and thousands of doctors highly respected that were not on board with the vaccine. The biggest disinformant was Dr. Fauci himself. He changed his expertise too many times to be trusted. What was Dr. Fauci's intent? This is all related, so I'm going to cram them all together. And then Annie's final thing on it was that there are also a lot of misinformation about how many lives are saved because they were vaccinated. We simply do not have the studies yet. My expertise, which I would be interested to know what that is, Annie, my expertise covers how blind studies are conducted, and they take years. And then Nancy said, I believe Dr. Fauci learned new facts. I often change my opinion of a new concept or a vaccine in this case when I have more experience with it. And then Annie said, exactly, that is why he should have never come out as a final expert. And then Emily adds in, I find this is very interesting. And so excuse me for kind of vomiting all this information at you, and Emily Brandt says something that I personally agree with. That's how it works in the medical community. Things can change very rapidly as you learn more about infectious diseases. Science is not static. And that is just, that's a fact. That's not misinformation. So with everything that I just threw at you, Luann, what do you have to say?
I think they said it quite nicely there, that this was real time and new information came out as it was rolling out, and things changed and we had to adapt, and things changed during the pandemic, and so the experts' advice changed also. And I think that with new information, a deadly virus that we have not encountered before, we had to be open to that. So there were infinitely more physicians who are on board with vaccines, masking, those types of things than there were on the other side. So that's really, as a nurse, 39 years, have some public health background. This is where I follow is, getting up to date information. And again, reading as much as you can. looking at the studies, and then going forth. And again, trying to do what's best to prevent most people from dying. And again, right now, it is truly deaths are from the unvaccinated. And so there's no debate there. So that is really what we know. And with all of the disinformation out there about vaccines, that was problematic for many people. And that's what we're covering in this topic right now.
Yeah, I think that for regular people who don't have a medical background, and who that's the real challenge of this pandemic has been to or any misinformation is to understand the sources, understand how information evolves, and be able to look at it academically and not with our feelings, to be able to vet the sources and sift through everything, and to decide what's true and what's not true. And that's what's been so hard with all the misinformation from the pandemic and vaccines.
Yeah, I think what this example also really highlights is that misinformation, it can be life or death. It just, it can be as simple as a shark in Lake Michigan, which, I guess could be life or death if it was true. but or then it comes to like this vaccine misinformation, and that has led to some people, dying. So it's just, it can be very serious. And it's just like Megan has said, we need to try to figure out which sources are ones we should trust.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
To the next slide?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, just because we have less than an hour, and I know there's more ahead in the PowerPoint. So we are going to move forward, not because it's not an interesting topic, but just because there's a lot more to discuss. And remember, this is about all misinformation that we're being encountered with, not just specifically COVID misinformation. That's a big piece of the puzzle, but there are other things to discuss as well.
There are just so many types of misinformation.
Exactly. And we haven't even gotten to the questions yet. The questions that were submitted before the panel discussion started. So take it away, whoever has the next slide.
That's me. So we've talked about this a lot already, but it's just important to highlight again, is that, false rumors spread faster than facts, which is unfortunate but true. This effect is more pronounced with political news than any other category. People who share false information are more likely distracted or lazy rather than biased, but we do know that sometimes they are just biased too. Some misinformation comes from politicians, which again speaks to people of power, and helps them get votes. And also attaching warnings to social media posts that feature information disputed by fact checkers can backfire. And sometimes people think, hey, that this means that this information is super accurate, and maybe that's not the case, or it's the opposite, where people were like, well, I don't want to believe that. And then lastly, social media can also skew opinions because of what people see or don't see.
So often on like a Twitter post or a Facebook post, you just get that juicy headline, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you don't read beyond much more than that, because that headline gets you so emotionally charged. So I think that's a really good point, Natasha. So much of it is what we don't see. There's so much more. It's like an iceberg. You just see the little tip, but there's so much beneath the surface that you need to read and sift through. And I think most people are, it says lazy. This is directly from MIT. It says lazy, but I think most people are just kind of complacent. I think complacent is the word I would use. Like, oh, you're just going on Facebook, like, oh my gosh, I read this. This gets me upset or excited or whatever. And then you end up sharing or believing in this fact instead of taking the time, because it is work and time to fact check and make sure what you are reading comes from verified sources. So it's so much easier to spread misinformation than actually do the work of verifying.
And that's why social media is, I'm on social media all the time and love it or hate it, but it's there, and it can be really bad for this kind of stuff, because it, like we've talked about again and again, it makes it so much easier to spread anything, and that cannot be good in some cases. So,
Absolutely.
or is not good. You guys know what I mean.
Well, and I always like to bring, so when we talk about social media specifically, I like to bring up, right, we just went through the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you used Instagram at all during that time, and you mentioned pandemic, vaccine, COVID, any of those words, Instagram kind of flagged your post with a clickable link to the CDC. And so no matter what your stance was on it, right? It doesn't matter what your opinion was, what information you were or weren't sharing, there was this little tab that would take you to the CDC. But then people started to find that annoying, right? I don't want your information on my post. I want my information on my post. So we start developing language or workarounds for some of those helpful pop-ups. And we'd use words like, oh, this panini instead of pandemic, or the bug instead of COVID, right? But then, right, and there's a double edge to it, right, depending on your opinion. If you're talking about this, and some people needed a factual resource rather than just your opinion, no matter what it was, if you're using language that works around this kind of informational flag, they no longer have access to that informational button. So that, right, there's so much. And then we also have to look at who owns Instagram, who just bought Twitter, right? And how much influence that person is using on what you can and cannot post and what gets changed or flagged and all of those other things. So social media is a very, very tricky news source to navigate.
Absolutely.
Well, and also just this slide, 70%. Falsehoods are 70% more likely to be retweeted than the truth. I know this is an opinion question, but why do you feel that is?
I can jump in with that one. Personally, from what I've seen and from what we've talked about, those falsehoods often have those emotionally charged words. And as we kind of referenced, when the emotional brain goes up, the logical brain goes down. You start thinking with your emotions, you stop thinking about logic. And so it's you get really emotional and you retweet, you share. You don't think about what might the actual facts be or read beyond the bold headline. So in my opinion, I think the emotionally charged words that are there for a reason, remember, are a big part of why it gets reshared so quickly. Because facts are often boring. They're not very exciting. They're a lot less exciting than the sensational headlines.
And this is also really, Julia, I assume your master's took about 2 years, correct?
3.
Right? So approximately. Yeah. We went to school for years to learn how to research well. Your average consumer of news doesn't have that background, right? So it is so much easier to click and share than it is to click, search, filter, refilter, sometimes get through databases that have walls or pay blocks, right? Like all of these things. Who has the time? Right. And it comes down to honestly, a lot of who has the time, but also the skills of, do you know what to look for and how to look for it, which is part of why we're here tonight, to help you know how to look for it. Because it's not always easy, right? And sometimes, especially if it's agenda-based in some sort, they're going to hide those like flags that would help us know that, ooh, this might not quite be right or accurate. And they're going to bury everything else. So we're here to kind of help you look for some of the, I think those are coming up soon. So maybe I'll just start talking and we'll get to it.
So maybe I'll just click and go to the next slide. I mean, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, look at that.
It's almost as if on cue.
And again, this is from the International Federation of Library Associations. Hooray. Really great tips. If you're interested in another presentation, I think we have it saved on our Facebook page. I last spring, I went through an entire presentation of how just to spot fake news. So if you're like, wow, I really want to do research after this, you can go see our archived videos where I get a lot more in depth on this. But
it's called, it is on the video section of our Facebook page. It is under fact versus fiction. That is, and 2 episodes are archived nicely as a subcategory, so you don't have to dig through everything. Just look for fact versus fake, right? Fact versus fake is what it was called.
Thank you, Tim.
Sure, I'm here to plug.
Yeah. So these are just some. We'll try to go through them quickly. Gabby, we can just bounce back and forth if you want. We'll try to go through these quickly because I know we are having a great conversation. So some things to consider when you see something sensational or you see something on social media, considering the source. So if you see something that pops up and you click on it, consider where it's coming from. Is this an unbiased website? Does it have a political leaning? Who is the base for this and why? Again, we're talking about the why the agenda behind what the information is. Is this unbiased? Is it not? Does it have some sort of political motivation? So always consider where it's coming from, because not all websites, not all news sources are created equally.
Okay.
Let's take the next one, Gabby, if you want, or I can keep going.
Which way do you want to go?
We can do read. Let's go read beyond. We'll go.
Can I read that?
Go line by line, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So read beyond is read more than just the headline, right? Like we were saying, the headline is those big, grabby, emotionally charged words that are getting you to click on it. You've probably heard the term clickbait, right? It is like fishing. We're going to throw out some real juicy bait and hopefully you'll click on it and read more. But you have to read more. Sometimes the headline does not match the content whatsoever, not even a little bit. You really have to read, what are they discussing? And I mean, it's going to keep going. So I'll just stop and let Julia take the next part, because all of these next ones come from reading beyond the headline.
So check the author. There should be a byline. There should be a name associated with the article. If there's not, that's a big, big red flag. Do some, and this is getting where we dig a little bit deeper. Who is the author? Are they credible? Are they someone who has a really obvious agenda? Are they even a real person? Like, right, you've heard the whole adage, anyone can be a doctor on the internet.
Right.
Make sure if you're reading an article, make sure the person is real and has the credentials that they need to be giving this information.
Well, and that is exactly why we all gave you our credentials and our names when we started this, so that you know that you disagree with me, come talk to me, right? I'm going to tell you why or how we found this. A person who is writing something, especially if it's big and important on the internet, they're going to want to take credit for it. I mean, some of this is people establishing their careers. They need you to know who they are.
Absolutely.
Supporting sources. I don't know if you've noticed, but on just about every slide we've shared this evening, we have a source link, because that's exactly what we're doing. We are showing you where we're getting this information from. These are not our opinions. This is based on our education and our research and our experiences.
And there's a works cited at the end. You can see even more.
We're going to give you all of them in big, bold details later. But whatever you're reading, especially informational-based things, should have sources. How do you know this? How did you come to this? Show me the study. Show me someone else's work that you used to start and finish yours. We as librarians, we tend to find the sources of sources of sources of sources. Like, right, it's a train sometimes of who is referencing what. And just because it's there, is any of it real? Guess what? I can write a fake bib. I wouldn't bother because they're tricky to begin with.
Yeah.
But make sure that those sources are real. Make sure that those are factual and backed up by other authors and more sources, right? Everything has to come from something.
Absolutely. And the next one seems pretty obvious, but this is a violation on like social media all the time. Check the date. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something reshared on social media and people are getting all upset about it. And I click on the article. It's from like 2014. And I'm like, well, guys, you should have been upset about this a long time ago, because this ship has sailed.
That has gotten me before. I have to look.
And it's just a simple matter of taking that extra second and checking the date. And it's caught It's caught even me before. I will admit it. It has caught even me. I see the headline, I get upset about something, and then and only then, after a while, I go back and look. I'm like, oh, you got me. I'm human. I have the same biases and emotional triggers as anybody else. But that can be a really simple thing to do, is just check the date. Is it actually current, or is this from like 2009? Like, can we let this one go?
If you weren't worried about it then, don't be worried about it now.
Exactly. It's not worth worrying about anymore, I bet.
The next one is is it a joke? That's actually my favorite. All of us here, and maybe you viewers at home, are familiar with The Onion. It is a very popular, very facetious kind of newspaper information source, except it's all sarcastic as heck. They take something that might be happening in the world or the news right now, really happening, but they'll spin it so that it's funny or hilarious or the total opposite. Just like that, opinionated entertainment is a good joke. It's educated entertainment, right? And we can do both of those at the same time. But it is important to know, again, who's writing this and why. Is it to make you laugh? Well, great, it did its job. Is it to educate you? Well, then maybe it didn't.
And then this one is probably the hardest one. Check your biases. Yep. Consider if your own beliefs could be affecting your judgment. And this is so hard because, right, as humans, we all have bias. And a lot of the times, if it's that implicit bias, we don't even realize it's there. So just being aware that, yes, you're a human. Yes, you have a bias. If you have a bias against one political leaning or another, could this be affecting how you're interpreting this article? Could that be affecting your emotional response? And again, this one's super hard, and it takes a lot of practice to check the bias, take a step back, and realize that could be clouding your judgment.
So I want to jump. I want to bring Julia's last point with me when we talk about Ask the Experts. Asking the experts is most easily asking your librarian. Because we are a free resource for you. You do not have to pay us to help you with your question or your search. If you want to pay someone else, you're more than welcome to. But we, as the experts, are also always checking our biases too. And again, it comes back to how libraries are governed. We are trained and retrained and continuously trained on how to do unbiased research. And to help you the same way we would help anyone else with their question, their interest, their hobby, their need, whatever it is. We're going to give you the same best, unbiased, unfiltered results. And if you've gone through all 2, 4, 6, 7 of these, and you have now come to us as the experts, guess what? We are still going to do all 7 of those also, just to make sure. And then we'll help you dig into those next and deeper steps.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of just add another little caveat. It kind of ties back to checking your bias. Just because you don't like what a fact says doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's where the bias comes in. You might not like the answer, but that doesn't mean the fact is not the fact. And as librarians, we will give you, if that fact is the fact, then that is what we are going to present you. It's not a matter of our bias. It is, we are going to search for the truth and the facts. And sometimes it's going to be something we don't like.
Right. And one of my favorite things about being a librarian is we help you figure out how we got there, right? We're not just doing it. I always like to say that librarians are magical, but we're not doing it magically, right? We have a real method, a real process, and we're using real resources. So if you don't believe us, you can always believe our resources.
Kind of like LeVar Burton. Don't take our word for it.
You know what? I'm just going to throw in a quick anecdote, and this is about what happened on April Fools. At the library, we did an article that was intentionally outrageous, and it was a contest. You were supposed to find how many inaccuracies there were, spelling, things that were allowed in the library, and just grammatical errors. We ran 2 very clickbaity pictures throughout the week to get people there, and we had much better response. It was in our e-newsletter, and we got a 4% higher open rate than we do normally for it. But it had a clickbaity picture of pets in the library, and one of these pets was a T-Rex. And then we did something about wearing pajamas is okay in the library, especially for staff. There were people who didn't even click on to read the story and were up in arms about, and there was a dog in pajamas in one thing. And it was all about, why are you letting people, pets into the library? What about the people that are allergic, and things like that. So, it is, people just don't want to pursue necessarily, or even something that silly to click. And you would know in the first sentence that it was an April Fool's joke.
So you mean I can't bring my T-Rex to the library?
If you have a T-Rex, if you have a full size, not a miniature or a diminutive T-Rex, bring it to the library.
Okay,
we'll see if we can get it through the loading dock.
That would be awesome.
So is that going to be this week or next week?
Next week.
Okay, cool. Because this week's coming to a close. So, all right. Shall I move on to the next slide?
Good to move on.
All right.
All right. I think we can go through this one kind of quickly. Just some little things to look for that can make a big difference. Check out the URLs. If it looks weird, that it's not going to be a verified source. And the sites with disinformation get tricky. Sometimes they put .com, .co. That was a really popular one for a while. They make it almost look like a legitimate site. So when you're looking at the sources, when you're looking for, or when you see where an article comes from or where news comes from, look at that link, really look at that link, because at first glance, it might look like a legitimate news source, but those disinformation sources are very, very tricky about the URLs. Oh, sorry. Do you want to take the next one, Gabby? You want me to go?
Yeah, I can do number 2. Okay. We'll share. Okay. Number 2 is to look at how it is laid out. The formatting can often be a big hint for you, just like big bold letters. Statements that are red or underlined, right? It is the way they write and print the words, print or electronic, you know what I'm saying? They're trying to get a reaction from you, right? When you talk in all capital letters to someone over a text, they know you're yelling at them, right? We know it in print. We know it when we see it. Exclamation points, they're trying to evoke an emotion. Incorrect dates, really outlandish and bold claims. Hey, did they include sources? Remember what we said about those. You have to have them. And then again, those sensationalist, ooh, that's just a fun word. Those really big flashy images that are doing either, they're looking for an emotional reaction. That's what images are doing. They want you to be happy. Oh, cute puppies. I'll click and look. Oh my gosh, something scary. I'm not looking, right? But all you have was that headline or that image stuck in your brain. All of these are really easy, subtle ways to get you invested in whatever they're doing.
The third one we have touched on before, so I'll just do it really quickly. Dig deeper. Find out who wrote the article, who they are, who supports the site. Does it have a political backing? That's going to tell you it's probably biased one way or the other. And again, as librarians, we're not telling you should never read one site. You should never read this site. We're just simply giving the information. If you do read information from sites that are biased, just understand that it might not be giving you the whole story. So we encourage you to always look beyond. Look at a different number of news sources. I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but
it ties in perfectly.
Yes, oh my gosh, I was going to the fourth one. So this is 3 and 4. But we're never going to tell you can't read that or you shouldn't read that. Again, as librarians, we try to provide you resources. We're just trying to get you to critically analyze. If you do consume news from a biased source or a slanted source, cross-check it and make sure that you are getting the full story and actual facts. So I guess I did 3 and 4 if you want to do number 5. Or if you had anything else to add, Gabby.
Here, we'll do 3 and 4 between the both of us.
Okay.
Something that also happens, and we have to be careful of, even when we're cross-checking, is that headlines are catchy, right? So if a media news source catches a really great headline and they're getting a lot of interaction from it, other media headlines or other media outlets are also going to pick up that headline because they want views, they want clicks and interactions as well. So just because multiple sources are reporting the same headline or snippets of the same story, right? If it sounds very canned and recycled, they're only giving you these 4 points and they all say it the exact same way. There might be a little more there, right? So that digging deeper. So it's kind of, you have to dig deep and wide. I will, number 5 real quick, try a reverse image search. So we talked about those really sensationalist, I'm just going to say that a lot now, images. They're trying to get something from you, right? That emotional reaction. Is this same picture being used for all of those other sources reporting that same story? Or did it really come from someone's Instagram of their really cute puppy? Go find out. You can do that. You can do a reverse image search to see where that originated from.
The power is yours.
Use it.
Really?
Use it
Yes.
well.
All right, I think we can go on, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, I have a parting shot from Annie, and I'm just going to skip a little bit down to it, but let's be careful not to silence the people, which I don't think, if there's been any constraints tonight, it's been because of time. You know, let's just be honest. We could have done this as a 4-hour program, and we all would be hoarse, but we could have kept going. But as is, time was our enemy tonight, because nobody is the final authority. I think it's great you're educating folks, young folks, to check their resources, but I think most of us here know all this. I don't know if that's true or not, because I don't know who's all watching. But
there's a difference, Tim, between knowing and practicing.
That is true. That is very true. And repeat that again.
There's a difference between knowing and practicing.
Which is absolutely true. And thank you for indulging me in repeating it. Would you say it was a sensationalist thing to do? But then she ends with, "Gotta go. Thanks for letting me sound off. Good job." Which, is what the conversation's all about. It's about having a conversation. And I'll be quiet and get to the next slide.
I do want to jump in just real quickly, Tim. That we are never, as librarians, I'll let people speak for themselves. We are never trying to silence or take power away from the people. Our entire existence is to empower you to take any interest, any research, any question, even your life. I mean, we help people with job applications, housing, rentals, right? Like, what do you need? We are here to help you get it. We empower the people. We do not limit the people.
I was going to say the exact same thing. And
oh my goodness, it's like we have the same job.
And that goes for all the people, exactly. So it's going to be all the different perspectives that are available at the library. And we're going to disagree with perspectives sometimes. You're going to find perspectives that you disagree with, and that's okay, because we support everyone's right to find those resources, to find themselves in the resources, to get what they need, and to see themselves in the library. So absolutely, libraries are the opposite of silencing the people. We are power to the people.
And Darian threw in a comment, which is great for what you just said. Diversity of thought, open minds, intensity of conviction closes them.
I love that. I'm writing that down.
Thank you, Darian.
Thank you, Darian. And should we move on? Because I keep looking at the clock and it scares me.
I know. We can just we can go through this really quickly. Again, we've said a lot of these before, so I don't think we need to rehash it. But just the things we've already talked about, they're very simple tips to stop information. Again, the power is yours. And the big one is going to be checking your emotion and biases. And then if you're going to discuss with someone, discuss respectfully. And if anybody else wants to add anything else, that's awesome. I think we've talked about all these, so we can, for the sake of time, we can kind of skim over it. Unless anybody else wants to add anything.
Well, I think it's good just to say the best sources, EDU, GOV, ORG, those are some powerful sources. So I guess just pointing that out so that people check to see that those are some of their best sources are coming from those URLs.
And I would say the best sources in general, I would say be careful with .org, because sometimes that's not the case.
Right.
Yes. So again, keep that fact checking, even with the .org, because sometimes you will have disinformation sources that have the .org. So it's not always a guarantee. So I just wanted to throw that caveat out there.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't know why we pull those specifically, it's because they typically have a credited institution of some sort behind them. It's not someone's personal blog, right? So that's why we use those, just in case you didn't know.
Thank you. And then we're excited. Look at, there's pages of it, Tim. You can just scroll through.
I know. Now,
you can click.
May I ask, while I click through the we're excited, is it okay if someone contacts me to share this PowerPoint out?
Yes, I was going to say at the end that we will probably just post it also, like the PowerPoint on as a PDF on our page too, Lakeshores United Visionaries.
Okay. And if anyone wants to get it from me directly, I mean,
that's perfectly fine.
However, anyone wants to get it, go to Lakeshores United Visionaries website to get it, or contact me, and I will just put my email address up here really quickly, just briefly. Oh, it's going to scroll. That's lovely. I forgot it was a scrolling, but it's tgadzinski@manitowoc.org. And as silly as it sounds, Gadzinski is spelled exactly how it sounds. So if anybody following along tonight would like the PowerPoint, go to Lakeshores United Visionaries website or contact me directly and we'll get it to you. There's a ton of good information in here and great sources. So please do that. And we are at the questions portion of the evening. Now, please still continue. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that you can actually get a better look at our panelists. And I would still encourage you to keep putting things in, comments, questions, but we did receive some questions. We had put a form online and we did receive some questions that we were going to address before we even started taking input from the viewers. And you guys had such good things to say and a good conversations to have that we kind of went away from our format that we were going to stick to, but I'm glad we did. I thought it was a really good conversation. But I'm going to throw out some questions to you now. And let's just start with this one, which is kind of big and loaded. Is misinformation really that bad?
Yes.
Yes.
Done. Next.
I mean,
you want to flash that out, or should we just leave it at yes?
I think we had a lot of examples about how it can be deadly, in fact. So I think
right.
we addressed that one.
And how many facets it just really can trickle down to. You might not think that you're being affected by one or the other, but I bet some facet is.
Another one that I think really has been addressed is how can I tell if something is fake news? We really just went through that. If you want, a hard copy, go to Lakeshores United Visionaries website, grab the PDF, or send me an email, and I will send the PDF to you. I mean the PowerPoint.
Get a lovely infographic.
Yes. Okay, this is interesting. It's so specific. Is there one site where I can find good information?
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna say no. There are better sites than others, but what I would encourage, again, as librarians, we're not going to tell you what to read and what not to read, right? But we are giving you the tools to be able to identify how to evaluate sources. So what I would recommend is really look at the infographic, the tips for stopping the spread of misinformation that we talked about, how to identify those really red flags. And that's what I would do for all of your media consumption. That's what I would recommend as a librarian. So again, unfortunately, there is no shining golden apple that we can give you. This is the answer. I mean, I would love that if I could give you, this is the answer. This is where you can get all your information. But again, I am a human with bias as well. So you wouldn't want that information. You probably wouldn't want that site from me. And as a librarian, I would just say, here is the information that you can use to verify those sources. And then if you have specific questions about a topic or about a research question, then please come and ask the librarians, ask the experts, and we'll find a plethora of sources that will give you the facts.
Yes. Well, and you'll also, as you do more research, you'll start to find reliable sources for certain subjects, right? No source is going to have every subject scientifically backed or proven or all of these different things, because what one institution can research all of that all the time? But even as you go along, right, we start to get tunnel vision sometimes when researching. I only trust this source, or I only trust this reporter, right? Whatever it might be. Even when you start to find ones that are reliable, go make sure that you are diversifying your information and your sources, so that you have.
I love that you said that. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, can you pop up Patrick's questions?
Those are some really connected ones to our questions right
now. Yeah, that's right. That's why.
Sure. Let me just get over there. Let's see. It's a two-parter. So, when you identify abcnews.com.co as a likely unreliable source, could you expand as to why more specifically with the content of .com be for commerce, edu being for education, etc. in the United States specifically? So, what news sources exercises the higher standards of journalism? Thank you, Patrick. Anyone?
No one wants to answer that one because it's not straightforward.
No. Isn't there a website that kind of filters out which journalism areas are less like biased?
What I would recommend as a librarian, research what the standards of journalism are and find out what those are. And then do what we've been telling you to do. Find out what are the standards of journalism. What is considered a high standard of journalism? We were talking about the American Library Association giving guidelines and standards for the library profession, and there are standards and guidelines for journalism as well. So that's what I would recommend. Find out what those standards of journalism are and use that in your research to be able to determine. And vet your news sources, is instead of, again, giving one answer, which I hesitate to do because there isn't, as Gabby was saying, there isn't one source that's always going to be the answer. So that's what, from the librarian, I would just recommend to do some more research or that's something a librarian could help you with. If you're like, hey, I want to know what the standards of journalism are, we can find out what those are. And help you in that research for sure.
Well, and that goes back to one of our first-ish slides of, help me, Julia, bias, slant, things like that.
Unbiased, slanted, and biased, yeah.
Right. And even those news outlets are, right, you said it, .com, commerce, right? Capitalism in news, that's their media that they sell, right, in a sense. And they are selling it to the right audience. They know who watches them, just like one channel knows who watches that channel, and they might slant it to the audience, right? They might slant it to the viewer and tell them what they want to hear or need to hear or might not be hearing. So that's why we say be careful of even news sources, because it's not just straightforward always.
Because if the news was just reporting facts, it would be a lot less exciting than what they're selling.
No one would actually pay attention to it, right? You'd be like, oh, I just heard what on the TV, what on the news, and that's what makes you pay attention. If it was just the straight up facts, you could just keep clicking the channel.
So do the research and ask your local librarians for help. We would be more than happy to help with that. That's a little bit more of a thorough research question. So it might take a little bit longer to answer, longer than we have to answer these questions. But that would be my recommendation.
And, specifically for medical nursing journals, there's CINAHL Complete, Medline Complete. So there's collection of literature of medical research. So there's search engines that you can, go to your library at your school that will help you, that will find the highest quality, largest collection of medical and nursing literature out there. So peer-reviewed healthcare databases that are big. So those are some things that when you get into your program, if you're going to be a nurse, or physician or in healthcare, that they have certain databases that they would gear you towards, and your librarian, wherever you're at, would be your biggest person to help you with that.
two more questions that I know we have for sure. And if we still have a little bit of time, so if you have comments or questions following along, please enter them. But here's one. What can I do when I see misinformation in a local newspaper? What's the best course of action to take?
I can answer
Luann,
that.
you raised your hand so politely.
This happened to me August 19th of 2021 and August 26th of 2021. There was misinformation in a health column in my local newspaper, and it was mis and disinformation. So I did call the editor, and I did write 2 letters to the editor, and I was really able to give the facts and really use multiple sources. And I was really disappointed that they published this misinformation in the middle of a deadly pandemic. And so I guess everyone, if you notice that, that's something that you would be able to do, is contact the editor and say, this is actually the real information. So that I was able to do.
I think it's very much what we're doing here, right? Do your part, do your research, use your resources, and then use your voice to contribute to that conversation. And it doesn't have to be aggressive. It can just be, right? Like we're having this very nice discussion here. Hey, I noticed this in the paper. And actually, cite your sources. If you're going to contribute to the conversation, cite your sources too. Pro tip.
Now, the last question that we have leads off of this when you're perhaps tempted to not be as civil in your discourse. And that is, what can I do when I see something my friends and relatives share that I know or suspect is misinformation?
Go back to that same thing. It's really hard to argue with sources.
Right.
And you're not always looking to argue, and that don't always look to argue. You will be a very sad person.
I have been known in my family to be the one at like a Thanksgiving dinner to be like, that's really interesting. Can you tell me where you got that from? I just want to, can you tell me what your source is? So now whenever conversations start happening, sometimes my relatives are like, I don't have a source, okay? And I'm like, well, I'd be curious to find out more about that. So asking for sources, I think, is really important. Be like, hey, where did you hear that from? I'm really curious, because that it doesn't sound quite right to me. It doesn't have to, like Gabby said, doesn't have to be aggressive, but I am known in my family as the one who asks people what their sources are.
A big part is taking it as an opportunity to learn together. Again, I work with teenagers, so we're learning a lot of things, and I never just do the information, right? Do the search for them, find the research, find the source. We don't do that for them, because learning how to is the real skill. I'm a librarian. I don't have all the answers, but I know how to find them, right? And you can learn how to find them together. And that is often much more constructive than I'm right, you're wrong, and this is why, right? Hey, I heard something very different. Why don't we look it up together? Oh, and then compare sources. This is what I found. How did you find that? Let me show you how I found this. Tends to go a lot better.
Absolutely.
And then they know how to check their sources for next time that they come across something that would be really jarring.
And I think with family and friends, we really do have to step back a little bit. It's a lot easier, at least for me, to get very emotional with family and friends. And I think one thing that I try to keep in mind is usually I don't assume that the person has like a malicious intent, depending on the family member. But but I think a lot of it is someone not knowing how to find or do the research and helping with those skills. I think that's a really important aspect.
What I have found too is most misinformation has a kernel of truth somewhere in there. And when I listen and I listen well, I might hear the other person's, maybe there's a little fear of something. So I guess that's what I like to do, is just kind of listen where they're coming from. And if we can kind of extract that, this little truth perhaps, or slanted, and see if we can't come to some agreement, or like you said, then be able to kind of follow up with some other things. But listening and finding out if there's fear-based also from that misinformation.
I know that we're about to lose one of our panelists, because she's actually working this evening as well as being on the panel. Before she goes,
the library.
I wanted to put this comment up that came on at the very beginning. While I think you were just being introduced, and Emily said, looking forward to this informative discussion. Thanks to all the panel members for providing information on how to fact check all things you see on the internet and just in general. I thought that was a great comment to close out on. And oddly enough, I'm going to jump back into the picture for the first time. Yikes.
Oh, Tim.
That's a lot of Tim. That's way too much Tim. But I wanted to thank Natasha, Gabby, Luann, Julia, and Megan for being here tonight. I think we had a great conversation on a topic that could easily have gone afield, and it didn't. And for the people watching who were following along, good input and some really good conversations tonight, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, as everyone was saying, on a topic such as this, where emotions are involved and you know, and biases, and I love these discussions. I'm so happy to be a part of them, but what really makes them are the people on the panel, the experts that we bring in. I just kind of make smart comments every once in a while. Not smart, but smart alecky, I guess would be a better way of putting it. But thank you, everyone who watched the program tonight. Thank you so much to our panel of experts. If you missed part of it, or if you want to recommend that somebody watch this, it will be on our Facebook and our YouTube channel forever. You know, until they go away, because we keep things on forever. So this will be the latest video. Just check in, and really that's the long and the short of it. If you miss part of it, or if you want to recommend it, send them to www.facebook.com/Manitowoc Library. And as Julia probably wants me to be quiet so she can get on with her appointed rounds, I want to thank everyone who was on the panel and who followed along tonight. Thank you for an exceptional experience, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.